Sometimes it arrives through hesitation, through small changes, through someone who used to pull away suddenly finding reasons to stay. And when you are dealing with an avoidant person, the signs are rarely dramatic. They will not always wake up one morning and confess everything they feel. In fact, the deeper their feelings become, the more confusing their behavior can seem at first. But there is a moment when something begins to shift. The walls they spent years building start developing cracks. The distance becomes harder for them to maintain. And the person who once protected their independence at all costs slowly starts making emotional space for you. The truth is, avoidants do not change because they are forced to. They change when someone begins to feel emotionally safe enough to matter. And when that happens, their actions start revealing what their words may still struggle to say. An avoidant person spends a large part of their life learning how to survive emotionally without depending too much on anyone. Somewhere along the way, they convince themselves that needing people creates danger. So instead of openly expressing emotions, they become experts at managing distance. They share enough to appear connected, but rarely enough to feel exposed. That is why when they begin letting you into their private emotional world, it is not casual for them. It is one of the clearest signs that their feelings are becoming serious. At first, vulnerability. They open up because their emotional connection with you starts becoming stronger than their instinct to stay guarded. That inner conflict is very real for them. Part of them wants closeness, while another part feels terrified by it at the same time. You may even notice hesitation while they are sharing. They might joke in the middle of serious conversations, pull back after opening up, or act unusually quiet afterward. This happens because vulnerability creates emotional exposure, and exposure feels unfamiliar to them. But the fact that they are still trying matters deeply. An avoidant does not trust easily. Trust for them is built slowly through emotional safety. So when they begin showing you sides of themselves they normally hide from the world, it means they no longer see you as someone temporary. They are beginning to emotionally invest in your presence. And often, what they are really asking without saying it directly is this: if I show you who I really am, will you still stay? That question sits underneath so much of their behavior, which is why your response matters. When they feel accepted instead of judged, understood instead of pressured, their walls begin lowering naturally, not all at once, but piece by piece. And for an avoidant person, every lowered wall is an act of emotional trust that should never be taken lightly. One of the most confusing things about being involved with an avoidant person is the inconsistency. In the beginning, they can make you feel incredibly close to them. They open up just enough, show affection, create emotional intensity, and then suddenly pull away without warning. It leaves you wondering what changed. The truth is, for many avoidants, closeness itself triggers fear. The more emotionally connected they feel, the stronger their instinct becomes to create distance so they can regain a sense of control. That is why consistency becomes such a powerful sign of love. When an avoidant starts genuinely caring about someone on a deeper emotional level, they begin pushing against their natural tendency to disappear emotionally. It may not happen perfectly or immediately, but you notice a shift in their effort. They start becoming more present in your life, instead of only showing up when it feels convenient or emotionally safe for them. You notice they reply more thoughtfully. They check in during the day without needing a specific reason. They begin following through on plans instead of leaving everything uncertain. Even when life becomes stressful or emotionally overwhelming, they try not to completely disconnect from you. For most people, consistency is normal. For an avoidant, consistency is intentional, because every act of consistency requires emotional availability. And emotional availability does not come naturally to someone who has spent years protecting themselves from dependency and vulnerability. It means they are actively choosing connection, even when part of them still feels uncomfortable with it. What is important to understand is that avoidants rarely change. because someone pressures them to. Pressure often makes them retreat even further. But when they truly value someone emotionally, their behavior starts shifting from self-protection to relationship protection. That is a major emotional transition. You may also notice that they begin considering how their actions affect you emotionally. Instead of disappearing without explanation, they communicate more. Instead of leaving you guessing, they make small efforts to reassure you. These changes may seem simple on the surface, but for someone emotionally avoidant, they represent growth happening internally. Love softens the need for distance. Not because fear disappears completely, but because connection finally starts feeling safer than isolation. And when an avoidant begins consistently showing up for you, not just when it is easy, but also when emotions become uncomfortable, it means the relationship is becoming emotionally important to them in a way they can no longer ignore. One of the quietest but most meaningful signs that an avoidant is falling in love is when they begin including you in their future naturally. Not because you forced the conversation, not because they are trying to impress you, but because somewhere in their mind, your presence has started becoming permanent. Avoidants are usually very careful about emotional attachment. Even when they care deeply, they often keep relationships mentally temporary. They focus on the present moment instead of imagining long-term commitment, because thinking too far ahead can make them feel trapped or emotionally vulnerable. The idea of needing someone long-term can activate fear inside them, so they avoid creating expectations they are not ready to emotionally carry. But love slowly changes that. At first, the shift can be subtle. They start mentioning future plans casually, assuming you will be there. Maybe they talk about a movie coming out months later and say, "We should watch that together." Maybe they discuss a future trip, a holiday, or even simple routines they imagine sharing with you. What matters is not the plan itself. What matters is the assumption behind it. You are no longer being treated like someone temporary in their life. For an avoidant, that is a huge emotional shift, because their future usually represents independence, control, and personal freedom. So when they start naturally placing you inside that picture, it means your presence no longer now. That is not casual interest anymore. That is someone emotionally trying to understand how you fit into the future they are beginning to imagine. And perhaps the biggest sign is this: they stop speaking like someone preparing to leave. The emotional uncertainty slowly becomes replaced with emotional inclusion. Their energy becomes less about keeping options open and more about building emotional continuity with you. For someone avoidant, love is not always expressed through dramatic declarations. Sometimes it is revealed in the quiet moment they unconsciously start planning a life that already includes your presence in it. Conflict is one of the biggest emotional triggers for an avoidant person. The moment tension appears in a relationship, their nervous system often interprets it as danger. Instead of leaning into communication, their instinct is usually to shut down, withdraw, become distant, or escape the conversation completely. This is why people involved with avoidance often feel confused during difficult moments. One disagreement can suddenly make the avoidant seem emotionally unavailable or disconnected, even if they deeply care. But when an avoidant truly loves someone, one of the biggest changes you will notice is their willingness to stay emotionally present during uncomfortable conversations instead of immediately running from them. That shift matters more than most people realize. An avoidant does not stay in difficult emotional situations because it feels easy for them. They stay because the relationship has become important enough to challenge their instinct to escape. And that is a major emotional transformation. At first, you may notice small differences. Instead of disappearing for days after conflict, they respond sooner. Instead of pretending nothing happened, they attempt to talk about the issue, even if awkwardly. They may struggle to express themselves perfectly, but the important thing is that they are trying not to disconnect completely. For an avoidant, Staying emotionally engaged during conflict requires vulnerability. It means sitting with feelings they normally avoid: guilt, disappointment, fear, emotional pressure, or fear of rejection. Those emotions can feel overwhelming to someone who learned to survive by emotionally distancing themselves. That is why their effort matters deeply. You may even notice moments where they pause before reacting defensively. Moments where they try to explain what they feel instead of shutting the conversation down. Moments where they admit they were wrong instead of emotionally disappearing. These behaviors may seem basic in healthy relationships, but for someone avoidant, they often represent enormous internal growth. Love creates motivation that fear alone cannot control anymore. The relationship starts becoming emotionally valuable enough that losing connection feels worse than facing discomfort. And that realization slowly changes the way they handle emotional tension. This does not mean they suddenly become perfect communicators overnight. Avoidants may still need time to process emotions privately. They may still become quiet when overwhelmed. But the difference is that they no longer use distance as their only coping mechanism. Instead of protecting themselves at all costs, they begin protecting the connection too. And when an avoidant chooses to stay, communicate, and work through difficult emotions rather than escape them, it is often one of the strongest signs that their feelings have moved far beyond casual attachment and into real emotional love. One of the biggest mistakes people make with avoidance is assuming that if they are not verbally expressive, they must not feel deeply. But avoidants often experience emotions intensely. They simply struggle to communicate those emotions in direct or traditional ways. Words like "I need you," "I miss you," or "I'm scared of losing you" can feel extremely vulnerable to them. So instead of expressing love loudly, they often express it quietly through actions, attention, and subtle forms of care. That is why it is important to place emotional energy. They do not easily involve themselves deeply in someone's emotional world unless that person truly matters to them. So when they begin paying close attention to your comfort, your stress, your happiness, and your emotional state, it means they are becoming emotionally attached in ways they may not fully verbalize yet. Their love often appears protective too. They may become more aware of what hurts you, what overwhelms you, or what makes you anxious. And instead of avoiding those things, they quietly try to support you through them. Sometimes it comes out through practical help rather than emotional speeches. They fix problems, they offer solutions, they handle small responsibilities for you. This is often their way of saying, "I care about your well-being," even if the exact words feel difficult to say. What makes this especially meaningful is that avoidants usually value independence strongly. So when they begin investing time, effort, and emotional attention into another person consistently, it reflects real emotional importance. And often, the deeper their feelings become, the more these quiet acts increase. Love changes their focus. They stop only thinking about protecting themselves emotionally and start thinking about how to protect the connection, how to support you, and how to make you feel cared for in the ways they know best. For avoidance, actions are often the language that carries emotions their words still struggle to fully express. One of the clearest signs that an avoidant truly loves you is when they stop treating the relationship like something disposable during difficult moments. In the beginning, avoidants often keep emotional distance as a form of self-protection. The moment things become too serious, too emotional, or too demanding, they may start questioning everything. They focus on flaws in the relationship, convince themselves something feels off, or emotionally detach before vulnerability becomes too deep. This is not always because they want to leave. Often, it is because closeness activates fear. Real emotional attachment means real emotional risk, and avoidants are deeply sensitive to the possibility of being overwhelmed, controlled, rejected, or hurt. But love slowly changes the way they respond to that fear. Instead of constantly searching for reasons to escape the relationship, they begin searching for reasons to protect it. That shift is powerful because it means the connection has become emotionally valuable enough for them to move through discomfort instead of automatically avoiding it. You notice they start trying harder during hard moments instead of emotionally disappearing. They become more willing to compromise. They begin taking accountability for behaviors they previously avoided discussing. They care more about repairing misunderstandings rather than simply withdrawing and hoping distance will solve everything. For an avoidant, this kind of effort is deeply significant because emotionally avoidant people are used to relying on themselves. Independence feels safe. Distance feels controlled. Relationships, on the other hand, can feel unpredictable and emotionally exposing. So when they begin actively fighting for the relationship instead of protecting only themselves, it shows emotional priorities are changing internally. You may also notice that they stop treating commitment like pressure and start treating it like responsibility. They become more thoughtful about how their actions affect you emotionally. Your feelings begin carrying real weight in their decisions. Even when they feel overwhelmed, they attempt to reconnect instead of leaving the relationship emotionally suspended in uncertainty. And perhaps most importantly, they stop running at the first sign of emotional intensity. That does not mean fear disappears completely. Avoidance can still struggle with vulnerability, even when deeply in love. But now there is another force competing with that fear: emotional attachment. They begin realizing that losing you would hurt more than facing the discomfort of intimacy. And once an avoidant reaches that emotional point, their behavior starts reflecting real commitment. Because love, for an avoidant, is not the absence of fear. It is the moment someone becomes important enough that they choose connection despite the fear.